Gilbert the caterpillar considered himself a rather sophisticated fellow. Well, as sophisticated as a bug who measured less than 2 inches long could be. He had an unusually keen eye for detail and a particular fascination with footwear, which most caterpillars would have thought completely irrelevant. After all, with so many arms, or well, legs, and so few places to go except leaves and branches, shoes weren't exactly a priority. But Gilbert was different. He had dreams. One balmy afternoon, Gilbert lounged on a broadleaf in the middle of a lush forest clearing, observing the world around him. Chirpy birds flitted about, flamboyant squirrels raced up and down the trunks, and a few other caterpillars dozed lazily. Seated next to him was his friend Marcel, who never quite understood Gilbert's fascination with foot attire. Marcel was a typical caterpillar. He liked leaves, hated being noticed by birds, and generally kept low to the ground. "Are you daydreaming about shoes again?" Marcel asked, stifling a yawn. "Only the perfect pair," Jobert replied, raising a segment that functioned as his brow. "You see, I plan on becoming the most stylish butterfly in these woods, and to do that, I need footwear that complements my eventual wings. I refuse to just emerge from my chrysalis in any old, well, nothing." Marcel blinked. "But shoes? Why do you even need them? As a caterpillar, you can't support so many pairs of shoes at once. And once you're a butterfly, your feet will be so tiny and so high up in the air that nobody will notice." "That's exactly why I need something statement-making," Gilbert explained. "When I land on a flower to sip nectar, it's all about the grand entrance. People notice shoes. Don't you want to make a good impression on the daisies?" Marcel didn't argue further. He'd heard Gilbert's speech about the importance of shoes enough times to write a treatise on it. Besides, Gilbert had a mission. He was going to find the perfect pair before his transition to a butterfly. Determined, Gilbert scuttled away from the leafy branch, ignoring Marcel's frantic wave. Some journeys, he thought, a caterpillar must undertake alone. He began at the base of the old twisted oak tree. All sorts of insects gathered there to trade, haggle, and boast about their goods. If anyone had anything close to shoes in the bug world, it would be here. But as Gilbert passed one vendor after another, he discovered many unusual items: feather hats for ladybugs, tiny umbrellas for shy ants, earthen mugs glimmering with dew but no shoes. Not even a single sandal in caterpillar style. Near the trunk, Gilbert stumbled upon an elderly grasshopper who had set up a small stall. In front of him sat a crisscross of twigs that, with some imagination, might resemble footwear. The grasshopper, wearing a monocle of polished dew, nodded at Gilbert with great sagacity. "Looking for something special?" asked the grasshopper, adjusting his monocle. Gilbert nodded eagerly. "Shoes, specifically." "Ah, yes, the old twig sandals. They, they don't exactly fit caterpillar feet to many segments, but they are widely considered the apex of bug fashion. Or at least they were 50 years ago." Gilbert tried them on well, sort of. He found that the twig sandals fit awkwardly on his front feet while the rest of his legs remained shoeless. Also, the straps kept sliding off, causing him to faceplant on a small beetle who squealed in alarm. "Perhaps these aren't for me," Gilbert conceded, returning them politely to the grasshopper. "I admire the craftsmanship, though." With a kindly wave, the grasshopper extended a thoughtful farewell. "Better luck in your quest, my friend." Leaving the oak marketplace, Gilbert felt somewhat disheartened. The perfect shoes, he hypothesized, might be something no one had even crafted yet. Maybe he needed to find a talented cobbler or set of artisans who could create something specifically for him. So he continued his journey deeper into the forest, weaving his way around puddles and stepping carefully over pebbles that seemed to appear out of nowhere. As evening approached, Gilbert found himself near a mossy log that served as a social gathering spot for insects after a long day. Fireflies lit up the area with a soft glow, and an impromptu choir of crickets chirped in surprisingly catchy rhythms. Fluttering near the log was a dragonfly named Beatrice, rumored to be the most fashion-forward insect in the forest. She always wore vibrantly colored wing wraps and was rarely seen without her mini-glitter top hat. "Shoes, you say?" Beatrice sighed after Gilbert's excited explanation of his quest. "I totally get it. Sometimes a ladybug's polka dot purse simply isn't enough. We need to push boundaries." Gilbert hopped on a tuft of moss so he could see eye to eye with her. Exactly, he exclaimed. I've tried the twig sandals, not a great fit. Do you know of any other fashion geniuses who could help me? Beatrice tapped her slender chin with a wing. Well, there is the famous Madame Moth. She tailors all sorts of wearable wonders from leaves and petals. I heard she's recently been experimenting with bark-based footwear. Maybe she can design something for you. Madame Moth lived in a hollow under a nearby log, surrounded by scraps of bright flower petals, leaf fragments, and dandelion fluff that dangled like streamers across her workshop. She was busy measuring a centipede's segments when Gillard crawled in, starstruck by the swirl of vibrant color. My dear caterpillar, she greeted, waving her measuring tape with theatrical flourish. Welcome, welcome. Have a seat on that little mushroom, and tell me, what can Madame Moth do for you? Gilbert explained his entire saga, his longing for the perfect pair of shoes, his future butterfly vision, and his vow to be the spiffiest insect in all the forest. Madame Moth listened with rapt attention, her antennae twitching excitedly. Ooh, how delightful! She exclaimed once he finished. I've never designed footwear for a caterpillar on the brink of metamorphosis. It's positively thrilling. She clapped her wings. We must get started immediately. Madame Moth measured Gilbert's every leg, though. With so many, it took quite a while. She even took notes on the girth of each segment, his color preferences, and the texture of the leaves he found most comfortable. The workshop bustled with excitement and noise as Madame Moth's assistants, tinny moth cousins with nimble little probuses, scurried around fetching materials. A large roll of bark-like cloth was unfurled. Madame Moth hovered over it, her eyes glistening. This, my dear, is what I call silk bark. It's as soft as the inside of a flower petal, yet sturdy enough even for a stag beetle's armor. I can craft your shoes from it, add embellishments like glitter from the fireflies, and we'll have the most dashing footwear the forest has ever seen. Gilbert did a little wiggle of delight. Oh, that sounds wonderful. Will they be, easy to walk in? My darling caterpillar, function must never overshadow fashion, Madame Moth retorted dramatically. But of course we'll make sure you can scuttle, wiggle, and eventually flutter in them. For the next several days, Gilbert remained at Madame Moth's workshop. He helped pick out the best color swatches to contrast with his future butterfly wings. He suspected he'd be a sort of electric blue or shimmering pastel, though obviously he couldn't be 100% sure. He tested small prototypes, a shoe for just his front left foot, then one for the second right foot, noticing how they felt and whether they pinched. Madame Moth was meticulous, constantly measuring and remeasuring to ensure perfection. One morning, after nights of squeaky scissors, sticky adhesives, and the hum of spinning cocoons of materials, Madame Moth presented Gilbert with the final products. A gleaming set of foot covers in a soft, silvery bark fabric, each one adorned with the faintest swirl of color that matched his caterpillar coils. Gilbert's eyes, if you could call them that, shone with anticipation. They're perfect, he declared, struggling to keep his composure as Madame Moth's assistants helped slip them onto his numerous feet. Each shoe fit like a dream snug around his segments, with enough flexibility that he could bend and wiggle to navigate the forest floor. He walked a few paces, carefully at first, and then started dancing, scuttling in circles as he admired his tiny reflection in a drop of dew. Madame Moth clapped her wings and nearly burst into happy tears. You are a vision, darling. An absolute vision. Gilbert bowed graciously and whispered his thanks. Then, with a final flourish, he gathered his new footwear and a few spares for the extra legs and set off back toward the oak tree to show Marcel and anyone else who would look. His quest, it seemed, was complete. But fashionable shoes on a caterpillar came with unexpected complications. The first was that the extra weight and combined traction made it difficult to traverse certain surfaces. When Gilbert tried to climb a particularly smooth branch, the shoes squeaked and slid, clattering him unceremoniously onto his backside. He figured he could adapt, but it proved trickier than expected. The second problem was attention. Caterpillars usually stay unnoticed, blending into leaves so predators don't snap them up. Now, sporting fancy bark-based footwear, Gilbert stood out like a giant neon sign reading, "Hello, I am a delicious caterpillar in fancy shoes. Come and eat me." The forest birds eyed him suspiciously from above, beaks twitching. He took to scuttling under leaves and behind thick grasses to avoid becoming a stylish snack. Then came the strangest revelation of all. The shoes definitely made walking fun, but they were so spectacular that they became a distraction from everything else. As Gilbert trotted through the forest, he spent more time looking down at how dazzling his feet were than at the path ahead. Twice, he nearly stumbled into termite mounds and inadvertently crashed into a wasp with no sense of humor. Everything was comedic to an outsider, but painfully nerve-wracking for Gilbert. Despite these challenges, he remained determined. He had the shoes, and that was all that mattered. Balling up his courage, Gilbert returned home one afternoon to show Marcel. He stood upon their favorite branch and squeaked his little bark shoes together, proudly proclaiming, "Behold, the shoes are real!" Marcel stared at Gilbert's footwear with wide eyes. "They're very impressive," Marcel said, though his tone wavered between admiration and confusion. "How do they feel?" Gilbert tapped them lightly on the branch. "They feel extraordinary, though a bit complicated. But I'll figure it out. After all, I just know my butterfly wings will match them perfectly. I'll be unstoppable." Marcel wanted to be supportive, but also saw the near accidents Gilbert had caused on the journey. "Well, be careful, and oh, hey, are you feeling itchy at all?" "Itchy?" Gilbert repeated, looking down at his segment-covered torso. "Now that you mention it, I do feel a bit tingly." Soon after, Gilbert had an unmistakable urge to find a quiet place, spin some silk, and start his metamorphosis. The transition to butterflyhood was nigh, and it whispered to him like a lullaby in the back of his mind. "Now? But I haven't even properly shown off these shoes yet," he lamented. "They're so new! I envisioned strutting around the entire forest for days and days." Nonetheless, nature wouldn't wait. Before long, Gilbert discovered a hidden area among tall ferns with enough sturdy branches to anchor a cocoon. He gently removed his shoes so they wouldn't get stuck and arranged them neatly on a leaf next to him. Then, with an instinctive process that had guided countless caterpillars before him, he began spinning silk around himself, layer after layer, until he was fully cocooned. It was a cozy darkness, peaceful, and filled with the possibility of change. But as swaths of time passed inside, one thought kept flitting around in Gilbert's mind. "Please let my wings match those fabulous shoes." He could almost see them shimmering on the leaf outside, waiting for him to emerge a brand new insect of elegance. Also, he found himself praying that no curious raccoon decided to waltz by and collect them as trinkets before he was done. Meanwhile, word spread in the forest about a caterpillar with fancy bark shoes that had gone into a chrysalis. Madame Moth told her clients that a remarkable butterfly was about to debut the greatest insect footwear in history. Beatrice, the dragonfly, always at the cutting edge of style, fluttered about bragging that she was among the first to see the soon-to-be butterfly in his ephemeral shoe-fitting stage. Even Marcel, with gentle sighs and a resigned shrug, told any insect who asked that Gilbert was sure to become the talk of the meadow. Days melted into nights, the forest light shifting and swirling around the chrysalis. Finally, at long last, the inevitable moment arrived. Gilbert wriggled, twisted, and with a final push, broke free of his cozy silk shell. His body had transformed dramatically. His once stubby caterpillar form was now streamlined, and his wings, oh, his wings were more wonderful than even he had hoped. On each side, a grand mosaic of dazzling azure and shimmering violet, peppered with delicate patterns of black and silver, framed by faint crescents of gold near the edges. Flying was suddenly possible as soon as he dried his wings. With quivering excitement, Gilbert stretched in the sunshine and opened his new wings to their fullest. He was perfect. If only he could find those shoes now. Where did he leave them? Creeping toward the leaf where he had placed them, he realized something shocking. The shoes were still there, but they no longer fit. His new butterfly feet were slender and petite, and the bark shoes that once adorned each caterpillar leg were comically large in comparison. It was like a human trying to wear clown shoes sized for a giant. "But no!" Gilbert gasped, realizing he couldn't even secure them. He tied one bark shoe to a single butterfly foot, and it slipped right off the moment he lifted into a hover. In a flurry of confusion, he tried adjusting the laces, inventing new knots, and even hooking them around his ankles. Nothing worked. Gravity and newly minted butterfly delicacy were not in his favor. For a moment, heartbreak loomed. All that effort, the measuring, the crafting, the quest. Now, these lavish shoes he'd pined for were practically worthless. He gave a sorrowful sigh, wings drooping in frustration. He imagined telling Madame Mott that her masterpiece would never again grace his graceful steps, or trying to explain to Beatrice that he wouldn't be sporting the cutting-edge footwear after all. But as Gilbert raised his gaze from the shoes, something else occurred to him. Slowly he spread out his wings again, marveling at the colors shimmering in the morning sun. It was breathtaking. Then he hopped into a gentle flutter, gliding a few feet above the forest floor. The sensation of flying for the very first time, drinking in the warm breeze, was extraordinary. So extraordinary, in fact, that the disappointment of not wearing the bark shoes began to fade into the background. He soared a little higher, nestled between bright shafts of sunlight that cut through the leaves. Then he swooped low, skidding across a shallow puddle that served as a perfect mirror. In that reflection, he saw how spectacular he already looked. An exceptional butterfly dressed in nature's finest colors. The shoes, for all their beauty, paled in comparison to this new form. Still, Gilbert wasn't ready to give up on them entirely. He carefully lifted the shoes one by one and considered if there might be a creative solution. Could the shoes be repurposed? Could they be decorated and worn over his wings like odd accessories? That seemed ludicrous. Maybe he could gift them to another caterpillar. He smiled at the thought, bestowing them upon some other adventurous bug who craved fashionable footwear. After all, the shoes were still marvelous. He decided, for now, to keep them safe under the leaves near where he had metamorphosed. Perhaps, in time, he'd figure out the perfect new life for these bark-based beauties. They had served their purpose in a way. They were a symbol of his ambition, his flair for style, and the excitement of chasing after something bold, something beyond the ordinary humdrum of a caterpillar's existence. Eager to show off his new wings, and maybe also share his minor shoe tragedy, he fluttered through the forest back to the oak tree. Beatrice spotted him first and squealed in delight, circling around him with flutters of her own shimmering wings. "Look at you," she exclaimed. "Oh, those patterns are simply divine. Let me see the shoes, though. Are you wearing them?" Gilbert sheepishly shook his wings. About that. Turns out I've outgrown them? Well, grown right past them. They don't fit these new butterfly feet." Beatrice's eyes widened. Then she tipped her top hat in respect. "No matter, darling. Those wings are 1,000 times more fabulous." Madame Moth fluttered by a few minutes later, and upon hearing the news had a moment of dramatic sadness. "Oh, what a shame. But that's metamorphosis for you, my dear. Don't worry, fashion is all about embracing change," she consoled him by patting a wing. "Perhaps we'll craft something new for you in due time." It was Marcel's reaction that most surprised Gilbert. The other caterpillar, soon to be a butterfly himself once he decided to get off his comfy leaf, listened to Gilbert's recounting of the outgrown shoes predicament, then gave a small, encouraging smile. "I know you loved them," Marcel said, "and I admit I never quite understood the obsession. But you look absolutely wonderful now. I bet those shoes, spectacular as they were, would have only hidden how graceful you've become." Gilbert paused, letting Marcel's words soak in. He'd never considered that possibility. His new wings were a source of awe not just for himself, but for his friends too. He realized that the shoes had been a gateway to discovering himself, a whimsical pursuit that led to the true transformation nature had always planned. It was a comedic twist of fate that he no longer needed them, for he had something far more marvelous, the gift of flight, in a body that already glimmered like jewels. With that understanding, Gilbert felt lighter than ever. He spread his wings wide, catching a gentle breeze, and soared above the oak tree. He hovered there, looking down at the bustling forest market far below, everything and everyone appearing smaller and more precious than before. He recognized the grasshopper vendor, still hawking twig sandals. He spotted Madame Moth's little cousins bustling about with rolls of silk bark. He even spied the bright glint of Beatrice's top hat. For a moment, he contemplated diving back down and giving an enthusiastic wave, but then he realized something even more exhilarating. He could go anywhere. The horizon stretched out, offering endless possibilities. He could visit flower beds beyond the meadow, meet exotic insects, or even pose near a waterfall to watch sunlight shimmer off his new wings. The choices were infinite. He knew that a pair of bark shoes, even perfect ones, could not compare to the sheer freedom of flight. And yet, he also carried those memories with him. The drive to find something special, the comedic mishaps of trying to keep a dozen shoes secure, and the quiet pride when he'd first slipped them on. All those experiences were part of him, woven into his story just as surely as his new wings were. The comedic irony made him smile. Nature, it seemed, had its own sense of humor. In the days and weeks that followed, Gilbert soared high above the forest, sometimes returning to say hello to Marcel, Madame Moth, and Beatrice. Each time they admired his wings anew, speculating about how much more brilliant they might become with each passing day. Occasionally, he would pass the old log where the bark shoes now sat, gathering a soft layer of moss. He admired them fondly, as one might admire a relic of an important journey, precious, yet no longer essential. One evening, as dust settled and fireflies painted the air in blinking patterns, Gilbert perched on a broad leaf to watch the sky darken. He had glided all day, discovering new flowers with nectar that, according to him, tasted faintly like honeyed sunshine. A gentle breeze rustled the forest canopy, fireflies blinked softly, and somewhere below, a cricket band began its nightly serenade. Gilbert closed his eyes and let the hush of twilight envelop him. His thoughts drifted back to how it all began, perched on a simple branch, daydreaming of footwear that would set him apart. He chuckled, recalling the comedic fiascos, stumbles, faceplants, near collisions with wasps, just to snag that sense of style. They brought a certain quirky charm to his story now. He might have pursued shoes, but nature had given him something infinitely more fitting. He was meant to fly, to show off dazzling wings that no piece of bark cloth could. In that quietly triumphant moment, he felt grateful for his uniqueness, his determination, and perhaps most of all for the humor that accompanied every step and misstep of his journey. A final breeze lifted his wings, urging him to glide across the star-speckled sky. And so he did, leaving the shoes behind but never forgetting the comedy of that quest for perfection before his flight. In the end, he realized he had found it, just not in the way he had first expected. And as he soared under the moonlight, his laughter echoed softly through the forest, a gentle, joyful reminder that sometimes the greatest transformation begins with something as seemingly ridiculous as a caterpillar obsessed with finding the perfect pair of shoes.